Welcome to the 5th episode of We Are Milton, a podcast brought to you by the City of Milton. Our goal for our podcast is to bring you information about all things related to Milton, Wisconsin. So that's information about community events, our community's history, and more. I'm Inga Cushman, Administrative Services Director for the City of Milton, and with me today is Kari Klebba. She's the Executive Director for the Milton House Museum and the Milton Historical Society, and you're the Interim Program Coordinator for the Milton College Preservation Society as well. So Kari and I had talked a little bit about what topics we wanted to cover in this podcast, this episode. And since it's the beginning of October, when we typically start talking about some of those unusual and weird stories, and they start popping up in our favorite TV shows, and we make our Halloween plans, we thought this would be a great time to start highlighting some of the more unusual stories in Milton's history.
I would say my favorite part of history. Now, so often, especially working with the Milton House, our history is rightfully so tied to the Underground Railroad, tied to our pioneer ancestors, but history is so much more than that. And preserving Milton's history, we get to preserve not only these glorious tales of abolitionists and the bravery of these people on their path to freedom, but we also get to preserve some of the kookier, a little bit more oddball stories that are also part of that tapestry that makes this community what it is.
Yes.
And all of them, like I say, are in their own way kind of kooky or a little strange, and they're fun. I think they're the fun stories about Milton.
And where did these stories come from?
Well, thank you for bringing that up. We have had a gift of a lot of wonderful researcher volunteers at the Milton House over the years. But in particular, I want to shout out to Rod Hilton. He's a great historian, and he has been doing a lot of projects combing the old Milton Courier microfilms to glean those little things, those tidbits. When we show them to some of the kids at the museum, like I try to train them about how we do our research, they call it Gossip Girl. How newspapers used to detail the day-to-day operations, they would do entire columns dedicated to things like Mrs. A went to visit Mrs. L over in Janesville, and it was news. And so it's fun, like I say, is when they report all those things, is that those stories pop up every now and again, and they give the sunshine to what would otherwise be kind of a drab read sometimes. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. Well, I hope so. I'm going to go full history nerd on you guys today. So thank you for letting me have this opportunity.
I'm really excited to hear some of them. So let's get started.
Okay. Now, we had a lot to choose from. Yep. But like you said, I tried to focus in on maybe 4. So, and the first one I wanted to talk about is that question we always get at the Milton House. And it comes up when people notice that there are actually 2 downtowns in Milton. Now, do you know why there's 2 downtowns?
Well, I do.
Okay.
Because of Milton and Milton Junction.
That's correct.
And they merged in 1967.
Also correct. Now, we also know from our work together on the Historic Preservation Commission that merger was kind of a long time coming, because really these were 2 communities founded by the same peoples. Yet they had very 2 distinct identities. And the official reason, as I always like to tell people, is that Milton Junction, originally called West Milton, was a community that sprouted up around the junction of 2 railroad lines. And that was a very natural thing to happen in pioneer times. But there's actually kind of an unofficial, possibly more likely reason why a second community founded in that area, and that's because Milton, on this side, how about we say Milton proper, as I used to heard it referred to, the east side, had very strong opinions on morality and on how one should conduct themselves, and those included a strong belief in temperance. Temperance being the very fancy word for you should not drink, you should not smoke. So there was actually a tradition of no alcohol or tobacco use in Milton. But there was less of that in Milton Junction. In fact, there seemed to be a little bit more of a frequent and encouraged bawdiness over there, where they had much different views on that. So over the years, there started to become kind of like a reputation, whereas Milton became associated with the college a little bit more sober.
Academia.
Yeah, I always say sober because that's the word out of both. We love looking at the pictures. I think we were talking about that the other day, where you see pictures of the people in Milton. It's that very traditional Victorian portraiture, very, very dour, very serious. And then everything we have over at the Junction, it's a party. There's a festival. Something's happening.
That's a side to be on, right?
It is. And what I have kind of as a comic book sci-fi geek, I kind of think of it as like these alternate dimensions. There's literally like Milton, and then Milton Junction is, in a positive way, bizarro Milton, like where they had a lot of like the same but different alternate universe style. So one of the stories I wanted to share with you about was not only that founding, but also just how, like I said, I enjoy the Milton Junction stories because there's a bit more of a joie de vivre to them, shall we say. Mm-hmm. But one in particular that came up was a raid on a blind pig.
What is a blind pig?
I'm actually glad you asked that, Inga. Everybody's heard of a speakeasy, okay? So we can picture like in Prohibition with speakeasies being where there's the dancing and there's drinking and there's food served. Well, a blind pig was in essence just a booze joint. The hole in the wall, the lowest part of the type of establishment that could serve alcohol. There wasn't anything fancy there, just booze.
Okay.
And so the nickname that it had was called Blind Pig. And we had a raid on a blind pig in Milton.
Ooh.
And that actually was at the Morgan House.
Okay. What's the Morgan House?
The bizarro Milton House, as we refer to. Now, the Morgan House was kind of the hub of Merchant Row over in Milton Junction. It no longer stands, actually. It's kind of tragic, but its foundations are underneath where Clegg's Union Depot is now. Mm-hmm. And as I said, bizarro Milton House, where they were known for not only as a rail, but also as being the proprietor of booze. And apparently they were doing so with or without a license.
Okay.
And here we have the blind pig raided by a Mr. Wall. Now, this actually happened in 1914, as I recall.
Okay.
So years ahead of traditional prohibition.
Yeah.
But Wisconsin was actually ahead of the times with putting in a lot of restrictions and licenses.
Oh.
So this guy, Mr. Wall, the proprietor, was found with a 10-gallon keg of whiskey. Now, he's got a lot of customers. And I just imagine all the people coming over from Milton to the Morgan House to check what's going on over there. But yeah, he ended up pleading guilty and was fined a total of not only the fine, but court costs of about $104. So mixed with the loss of a 10-gallon keg of whiskey, that would translate in today's value of somewhere in the area of like $2,500 to $3,000 fine. Yikes.
That's a lot.
That's right. But we really liked it because the blind pig is a phrase that starts to come up a lot in the papers right around 1880.
Okay.
So it took me a while to go, what? And finally like, okay, I have to figure out what the blind pig is because it's clearly not the high school mascot. We have to figure out what's going on.
So was it common knowledge that this place was a blind pig then?
It seems to me that everything was common knowledge in Milton. They just happened to report it on this time. But yeah.
I guess that's what happens when you live in a small town.
It's a smaller community. I mean, people are really living on top of each other at that point. And like I said, it's a place known for shenanigans and rabble-rousing. And I can't imagine people thought that was going on because there wasn't alcohol involved. So a fun place. Fun place.
So October, Halloween, kind of a time where you get some spooky stories too.
Oh, my. Well, I'm sure that we have talked about this many times, like off the air, obviously, but we get a lot of questions in Milton about paranormal connections. It's very natural, especially with a lot of historic buildings, with a town with a rich history. I feel that there's this desire to know if there is anything spooky or paranormal going on.
Well, and Milton College, you guys just had the world's largest ghost hunt, right?
At Main Hall in Milton College, they participated with the Society for Anomalous Studies in the world's largest ghost hunt, which was literally an international ghost hunt. They had simultaneous ghost hunts going on in different communities, different countries. I know there was one in Australia, Venezuela. Like I said, simultaneous. And the idea being that they wanted to do this to help raise awareness for historic preservation. You know, how these properties really serve a purpose and they need to be preserved, obviously. So we were thrilled to work with them. And Main Hall always has weird stuff happen.
Yeah.
Now, I choose to not assign, is it paranormal, is it not? But I'm always sitting there going,
that was interesting.
That's different. You know? So hopefully we'll have some reveal information for that. The team's going to be working on that. They check over the pieces and then they present their findings to us, and hopefully we can do something with the public.
Perfect.
You know, she had an idea for what we would call it too.
Oh, yeah?
You ready?
I'm ready.
She's like, you should do it in January, February and call it the dead of winter.
Oh.
And I'm like, that's what we're calling it. Like, that was genius. So Thank you, Cindy, at SAS for that. But no, so on that vein, and because it's October, I knew I would have to find some sort of ghost story that I can kind of get behind. And one that pops up a lot, I mean, it wouldn't be Weird Milton unless we talked about this, is actually the ubiquitous woman in white.
Okay.
I feel like every community has a woman in white. I grew up in Janesville, and there was a woman in white. And I know there's one in Sheboygan. No, okay. But there was a legend of a woman in white who was seen on a railroad line. She was actually noted crossing in front of trains on railroad tracks on a particular north-southbound train line that ran from Milton kind of towards the Fort Atkinson area.
Okay.
And she's popped up several times, but we picked one particular mention of her from November 15th of 1883. And again, this is part of that Gossip Girl reporting I was talking about, where it says specifically, the ghost that was seen by Mrs. G. Pritchard, and then they refer to as Mrs. P, was coming south on the number 30 due at Koshkonong at 1:40 a.m. And she reports seeing a Mother Hubbard-styled figure crossing the tracks.
Oh.
All right, but like in front of the train, which is how she was able to see her. Now, I'm assuming this is a time before YouTube daredevils, so I'm sure it definitely aroused suspicion. But as they continued on in the reporting, it actually is said that it was also seen by the engineer, the head brakeman, other people that were on board. This was noted. So again, this woman in white pops up a couple of times, but this one was notable enough by enough witnesses that it actually ends up making the paper.
So did the reporter go out and find all the different witnesses that saw this person, or was it separate stories that were reported?
I think that's a really great question I can't answer.
Okay.
My guess is that it was something that was spoken about in the community,
okay,
and then was reported upon
okay.
in this, like I said, that's how they did it there. Like, I heard Mrs. P saw a ghost. So that's probably how they got their crack reporting on this one.
Okay.
But I thought that was fun. And so that feeds into the whole ghost in October thing. But it actually brings us to, speaking of seeing mythical, possibly not ghosts or what people say they are, I will tell you my favorite one that I came across, and it was actually one of the first research requests I got when I joined the Milton Historical Society. Are you familiar with Clear Lake?
I am.
Okay. Where is Clear Lake?
Just outside of town.
Just outside of town, but one of the many of the lakes that make Milton Prairie du Lac part of this incredible lake district.
And if you're wondering where Prairie du Lac comes from,
I'm so sorry.
Watch our first episode of We Are Milton, and Kari is there towards the end talking about why Milton is called Milton and the name Prairie du Lac and where that comes from.
We came full circle there. And but no, Clear Lake, beautiful lake, spring-fed lake. But per the Gazette, Janesville Daily Gazette report on August 25th of 1893, also well known for its sea serpent.
A sea serpent.
A sea serpent in a spring-fed, freshwater, inland lake known for sea serpents.
How big was said sea serpent?
It's interesting that you say that because I don't know.
Okay.
But I can tell you that according to the reports, two young ladies, Maud Richardson and Florine Ogden, saw it pop its head out.
Okay.
Now, if you really read the story, lots of I have more questions come up. My personal favorite was that they were in the lake. It's clear they're in the lake. It rears its ugly head out of the lake, and armed with clubs, set out with a boat to effect its capture. So I don't usually go to the lake with my bludgeoning club, but they did apparently. And moreover, the fact that they were like, I'm going to go bag me a sea serpent today. And per this report, they, after a few well-directed blows, stilled forever the horrid wrigglings and towed it to shore. Now, the Gazette is very eager to say, we're so relieved to tell you guys that it's no longer a menace. So that tells me it's something that had been reported or spoken on it before. And furthermore, that its capture proved conclusively that it was not a vision hatched up by a frequenter of the blind pig.
Oh.
See? You see? So that's in there too. But for me, that was definitely a fun one when I got that call. It was a man who's doing books on sea serpents, etc.
Okay.
And this was how we came to know of it, because he goes, I would like more information on the Clear Lake sea serpent. And I remember being like, me too.
Let's talk more about that.
Let's talk more about this. So with that article, I am pleased to announce that I believe with the efforts of Maud and Florine, bless their hearts, may they rest in peace, we no longer have the menace that was the Clear Lake sea serpent.
So how many times would you say that this type of sea serpent came up in Clear Lake's history?
That's a great question. Again, I can't tell you for sure because we really looked hard and only found this one newspaper report. But as how they're writing it here, it makes us think it was something that had been like
very common knowledge before, in the community.
Like, well, you know, Clear Lake and it's sea serpents, which again, I'm always like,
there's just so many of them there.
But you know,
who knows?
That's what I'm saying. I don't want to judge. They didn't have sunglasses back then. Maybe it was a really bright day and a wave looked like, you know, there's lots of things that make you go, they saw something. And these ladies clearly dispatched some sort of wriggling serpent. And maybe it's telling that they left out how big it was. Maybe that's part of it. Yeah. Thank you for letting me go turbo nerd on you with that history, especially that we can go into these old tales and really like glean from them the fact that Milton has a rich history, and it is connected to not only the lakes, not only to the other communities, but definitely we have a lot of historians to thank, people who were happy to write it down, who are happy to make these essays, write these letters. And again, I want to thank Gossip Girl and the old Milton Couriers for writing down every little thing. And if I didn't shout out to Rod for pointing out some of these stories in the first place, I'd be remiss. So thank you, Rod, for all the work that you do, and thank you for letting me share some of these fun stories with you.
Yes. So we thank the Milton Historical Society, Rod, Kari, everyone for keeping our Milton history alive and you know, bringing it to us today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So thanks everyone for listening to our 5th episode of We Are Milton. The next event at the Milton House, what's coming up in the next couple weeks?
In the couple of weeks we have Hocus Pocus and Booze, which is just going to be a fun 21 over movie night for the classic Hocus Pocus.
And I mean, that's one of my favorite movies from my childhood and perfect for the Halloween season.
Yes, exactly. It's just going to be a fun, chill community event where we can all get together and celebrate one of the greatest Halloween films ever.
Yes.
And
enjoy the Sanderson sisters, right?
Gosh, yes. I'm excited because we're going to be, we're being supported by not only the Milton Lions Club, but also the 3 local wineries are each going to have a fall wine to sample celebrating one of the 3 Sanderson sisters. And all proceeds from the wine sales, from the ticket sales, will go to benefit the Milton Historical Society. So it's a fun, chill fundraiser that I'm looking forward to at the very least.
And more information is available on
definitely
Milton House
miltonhouse.org, but I always recommend our Facebook page. It is the easiest way for us to keep everybody updated.
Great.
Yeah. Thank you.
So again, special thanks to Kari for sharing some of Milton's more unusual stories with us. And our podcast, We Are Milton, is officially on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and SoundCloud. And I do post a video version on YouTube as well. So in closing,
I'm so sorry.
We're going to try it again. 1, 2, 3. We are Milton.